A few weeks ago, two lawyers from Bombay, Gaurav Kumar Bansal and Deepak Kansal, filed a PIL in the Supreme Court asking the government to pay a compensation of 4 lakhs each for every COVID death in the country. According to the National Disaster Management Act 2005, there is a provision under Section 12 for payment of ex gratia compensation to any citizen who dies in a natural disaster or calamity. On March 14, 2020, the Home Ministry wrote to state governments that the central government has decided to treat COVID-19 as a notified disaster. Also, back in April of 2015, the Disaster Management Division of the Home Ministry had written to all state governments specifying rupees 4 lakh as compensation per deceased person for a national disaster. So a compensation of 4 lakh rupees with around 4 lakh deaths would be about 16,000 crores. The Solicitor General, Tushar Mehta, representing the central government, replied to the Supreme Court that the government would be unable to pay this amount. The Solicitor General did tell the court that it is not that the government does not have funds, but that they feel this would not be an appropriate or efficient use of those funds. He was at pains to make this point clear. He submitted that the union government is not facing financial constraint. The issue is not of fiscal affordability. He also proceeded to state, it is submitted that it may not be misconstrued that the government is opposing grant of ex gratia payment due to financial constraint. So, they don't have a financial constraint and yet are opposing this grant? Why? Well, the Supreme Court gave its judgment on June 30th and rejected the union government's argument. The bench held that the government's arguments cannot be accepted as once a disaster is declared a notified disaster, Section 12 of NDMA shall be applicable and is mandatorily to be complied with. The court ruled that a compensation will have to be paid for every COVID death, and they have given the National Disaster Management Authority 6 weeks to come up with the guidelines and framework for this compensation. They have allowed the authority to decide the amount to be paid as compensation. 16,000 crores would be the outlay at the requested 4 lakhs per death. And trust me, 16,000 crores is nothing for the government. We spent 8,400 crores on 2 planes for the Prime Minister last year in October. And we are going to be spending 20,000 crores on Central Vista. Just the extra tax collection from fuel taxes this year is about 2.5 lakh crores. So 16,000 crores for dead citizens is definitely not a big amount. In my opinion, the real reason why the central government refused to pay the compensation is not money. It is the number of deaths that's the problem. If a compensation is announced, then the real number of deaths might emerge, and all indices point towards a much higher number than stated currently. The civil registration system has data about the number of deaths in the previous years, and it compares the number of excess deaths across the states to those previous numbers. As they have historical data, they also have a trend that predicts the number of deaths that would occur in a given period. With this info, they can count excess deaths that have occurred over and above the expected number. While all excess deaths in 2020 and 2021 may not be due to COVID-19, surely a large number of these deaths are due to the pandemic. Karnataka's excess deaths is nearly 6 times the official COVID death toll. Haryana is 7 times. Chhattisgarh is 4.8 times. Rajasthan at least 5 times. Kerala is 1.8 times. Every single mathematical or serological model has pegged the loss of lives in India at much higher levels than what is the official figure currently. The various estimates range from a minimum of 3 times the figures being quoted to a maximum of 12 times the actual figures. 12 times. BJP leader Ram Iqbal Singh is an ex-MLA from Balia in UP. As recently on 26th of last month, he stated that there have been at least 10 deaths in every village in UP. This is a leader of the ruling party himself making the statement. Do you know the number of villages in UP? 1,07,000. 10 deaths per village would make just the UP total more than 10 lakhs. The overflowing crematoriums across the country during the second wave, the bodies floating in the Ganges, the civil registration system numbers, they all indicate towards a much higher COVID toll than currently being stated. And almost every single Indian and foreign publication has run stories about the underreporting of deaths in India. The government would not have wanted to deal with this problem at this juncture, considering that assembly polls in UP are just around the corner. Prime Minister Narendra Modi kicked off their election campaign in UP 2 weeks ago, while showering praise on Yogi Adityanath's handling of the second wave. Just over 2 weeks after Ram Iqbal Singh made the statement of COVID deaths in every village. The Supreme Court had given the government time till August 11th to declare the compensation and guidelines for disbursement. The government has now asked for 4 more weeks of time to come back with its response. I sincerely hope the government decides to pay the amount requested. This would bring some succor to families that were the worst affected in this devastating wave. So will the dead please stand up and be counted.